Hello, and welcome to Linear Functions. My name's Tuesday Johnson. Here's an introduction to a concept. So what is a linear function anyway? A linear function is a function that can be written in the form f of x equals mx plus b. Now the function notation, right, that we've been working on, we've seen that already. F evaluated at x, f of x. This is not multiplication. Right? And we've seen this formula before too. We've seen it as a linear equation, which is similar. But for an equation, we'll use y. For a function, we'll use f of x. But the right-hand stuff is all the same. And keep in mind, your m and your b will be actual values. Y and x stay as variables, but m and b are fixed numbers depending on your problems or homework or conditions that you're working on. So what about this m and b? The graph of y equals 3x minus 2 is shown over here. I use Desmos.com or the Desmos app. It works as well on all cell phones. Great app. It's very user-friendly. That's not a commercial. They didn't pay me. From the formula, we know that m equals 3 and b value is negative 2, right? So slope and y-intercept. What the y-intercept, the b value tells us, I didn't tell you it's y-intercept yet. If x equals 0, then y equals negative 2, right? Put it in here. If x is 0, I'll have 3 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 2, so I'll get negative 2. On my graph, if my x value is 0, I have not moved left or right. Y value is negative 2. I have a point on the graph. Now our slope, which is 3, can always be written as a fraction. So I'm going to rewrite 3 as 3 over 1. This means that if x increases by 1, the y value will increase by 3. So if x increases by 1, the y value is 1, 2, 3. If x increases by 1, the y value increases by 1, 2, 3. Every time the slope will take us to another point on the graph. And as I mentioned earlier, I spoiled it. We call B the y-intercept of the graph because that is the location where the graph crosses the y-axis. All right, so the slope. I'm not really sure of the reason for that to fly in there, but we'll take it. We use m as a stand-in variable for the slope. And the crazy thing is nobody really for sure knows why. The French word monter means to climb, and so possibly there was a lot of kind of variable naming along the time where there would have been a lot of French mathematicians working on this. So maybe others, they aren't sure. The scientific community hasn't settled on anything, so it's crazy that something as common as an m, we don't know why we use it. We call the slope, or it's known by rise over run frequently. And rise is a change in y. And in math, to designate a change in, we'll use the Greek letter delta. So this is read as delta y over delta x, or change in y divided by the change in x. And more formally, if we're given 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, the slope of the line between them is going to be given by m equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1, as long as the x values differ. We cannot divide by 0. So if the x values are the same, the slope is not defined. Okay, so rise is how far do we go up? Run, how far over? Rise over run, rise over run, rise over run. In order to write a linear equation or a linear function, depending on which one you need, we follow this series of steps. We're going to find the slope. Now you may be given 2 points, you may be given a point and a line with some connection to the equation you need to write, parallel or perpendicular or something. Or you may be given information verbally where you must interpret to find your points. Any way you look at it, the first thing you do is always find your slope m. Once you have this slope, you're going to use it and one of your points to find the y-intercept. And it doesn't matter which point you use, either point will work, which is nice. So first we find m, then we find b. Finally, we're going to write our equation with proper variables using your found slope and y-intercept. I say proper variables here. You'll find that sometimes if we're using time as our variable, we'll have y equals mt plus b. All right, so watch for your variables and make sure you're using the proper input and output variables. And you'll use your found slope and y-intercept. So first we find m, then we find b, and then we put it all together, y equals mx plus b. Let's take a look at an example. If we wanted to write the equation of the line through the points 1, 2, and 3, comma, negative 1, the first thing I would do would be to find the slope. I'm going to use the slope formula that says I'll take y2, the second y value, and I'll subtract y1, the first y value. So I'll have negative 1 minus 2 in my numerator. The formula then says we'll take x2, second x value, minus x1. So the second x value minus the first x value becomes 3 minus 1 in our denominator. Negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. I did put this negative out in front of the fraction. I could have just as easily floated up in the numerator. As long as there's only one negative sign, we generally take it either in the numerator or out in front of the fraction. It's kind of a student's choice, but a mathematician's choice would almost always be to put the negative out in front. So we found the slope. Now we need to find the y-intercept. Using the equation y equals mx plus b with our known values, I can use either one of these 2 points. I like to be a positive person. I'm going to use 1, 2. I don't want to use anything that has a negative in it. It brings me down. We don't want to be bummed out while we're doing math. So when y equals mx plus b, we'll put a 2 value for our y equals a negative 3/2 for our m. X value is 1, and we don't know b. Right? We know y, we know m, we know x. We can find b. In order to solve the equation for b, we're going to add 3/2 times 1 to both sides. So b is equal to 2 plus 3/2 times 1. Order of operations tells us take care of 3/2 times 1 first. So now we have 2 plus 3/2. If we're adding 2 values and one of them is a fraction, you should get a common denominator. We could rewrite 2, a whole number, with a denominator of 2 by turning it into the rational number 4 over 2, right? 4/2. So 4 over 2 plus 3 over 2 makes 7 over 2, our y-intercept. So we could write this equation as y equals a negative 3/2 x plus 7/2. All right, no problem. You've got this. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button.